I'm Ed McElhenney, by the way. I am, if you were here last year and the year before and the year before, you might remember me. I have been designated by Connie, and Connie is typically out here right now. She's at a board meeting, but Connie has designated me as the moderator for a large majority of the Warbirds in Review. So I'll say now, welcome to Warbirds in Review 2024. We've got a great program ahead of us, 2 shows a day basically through Saturday. And we're starting, as you can tell, with these L-birds over here. We've got 2 L5s, and we'll get into that here in a minute. But Connie has also given me some verbiage to read here, and I've already thanked Teresa, so we can end the living history guys. There they are. Thank you very much for what you've done. And they're back every day, I want to say, also, so you'll get a chance to see them. And we do have some great shows this year. So Connie has said, on behalf of Connie Boland, Warbirds in Review founder, coordinator, and executive producer, welcome, sure. It is the Warbirds of America 60th anniversary this year, which I didn't realize until I read this. And I went, wow, but it's the 21st year of Warbirds in Review. And what we're doing is, again, same thing that you see written on the concrete here, history, heroes, and heritage. And that's what we're honoring. She says here, 21st year of displaying significant historical aircraft alongside the people who own, maintain, and fly them. Starting from humble beginnings, the presentations have developed into world-class presentations for you here in the audience and people around the world to enjoy. She has harassed me a little bit. She says, hey, I've made you famous. Last year, we had over 6 million views online of this presentation. So indeed, she has made me somewhat famous. Specifically, we want to thank the people who provide these aircraft, those aircraft, and those aircraft to make these presentations possible. But more importantly than that, we've got a couple people, and I don't think they're here. Ron and Diane, I think they're still working on a hell diver right now. But Ron and Diane Fagan are the owners of the Granite Falls Museum up there. It's the Fagan Fighters World War II Museum. If you've never been there, I'll tell you now, I've been there many times, and it rivals the Smithsonian. It is absolutely spectacular, and the airplanes that they have and vehicles that they have all work. They drive, they fly, and it is something of great consequence. Anyway, if you see them, Ron and Diane, they also, hey, gave us that building back there. So they are great benefactors of this presentation. Another guy we need to thank is Jim Hagedorn, Scott's Miracle-Gro, personal friend, known him, in fact, grew up in my hometown way back when, if you believe that. And he'll be here, I think, either this afternoon or tomorrow. P-50... Show off. Anyway, yeah, he is of consequence for this organization also, a great benefactor. Scott's Miracle-Gro is what he's in charge of. And if you do see him, he's a little short guy. And you can harass him all you want, but he dead sticked a P-51 Mustang into Milwaukee 2 days ago. The old Crow had a carburetor problem, and anyway, did an outstanding job and got the airplane down. The good news is it was a carburetor problem. They got a new carburetor. I think they installed it yesterday, and that airplane should be here today. And that'll be part of the Bud Anderson commemorative event that we have tomorrow afternoon. Okay, I'll finish with what exactly she says here. Our mission is to recognize and honor the veterans who served their country. As we entertain and educate, we continue to record history, heritage, and heroes in their own words. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to thank Kyle Guyette, and she's in the back right now. She's a big part of this program also, along with her world-class production team, and that's Scott, and Scott is back there doing all this right now also, and a very talented All right, thank you. Yeah, he does it because he can. So now I'm going to ask that you please direct your attention to the Jumbotron up there, and we're going to get this presentation started. We're going to be talking about these two L5s here today, and we've got some great pilots, and we have an artist, as you can tell, who's going to be working here shortly. But we're talking about the L5 Sentinel. That's what these things are. Guests of honor, please join me up front here. Steve, Chad.
Where do you want us?
Go ahead. We'll put Chad over there. Steve, you can sit there. We've got a couple other guests, and they're sitting in the front row. That's Sam and Sherry Tabor, and they're there, by the way, because this is their airplane. Okay, so they get special seating. And yeah, I'll do a brief introduction. We'll start first with this guy on my right here, Captain Steve Seal, United States Navy, retired. When they told me I was going to have to do this program, they said, yeah, this is who this guy is. And I guess I met you down in Georgia, I don't know, a while back. And I hadn't done a lot of research on who he was. But they said, yeah, he went to some school whose mascot was a goat. And I just went, hey, a mask. And I went, oh, yeah. I said, I know exactly where that. In fact, when I was in my school, and our mascot, by the way, is a falcon, okay, a performing falcon. But when I was at school, I think we stole the goat, as I remember, before a football game. But yeah, he's a United States Naval Academy graduate in 1977. And my brother is also, so there's between my brother and I, we've got a little rivalry going. But he seems to think that Steve may have harassed him a little bit. My brother graduated in 1980, so you were an upperclassman. So he said, So my brother said, get back at him if I can. But that's where he started out. Got his wings of gold, ended up as a P3 pilot, squadron commander, and flew all over the world. And again, small world. We were sitting back there today talking about, well, where were you? And I was stationed in Iceland flying F4s for a year, and it was truly a naval station, Keflavik Naval Air Station, and who also happened to be there, not the same time, but he spent many, many, many months up there in Keflavik also, so we've got that connection. But that's who this guy is, and then he got into the Warbird world, and I'll let him describe how all that happened here in a little bit. But then the guy on his right, you'll look at him, and yeah, he dressed up for this event, you can tell. He is, but let's see, by what has been written, a historian and an artist. I'd like to put it the other way around. I'd say he's an artist first and a historian. But he's here because he's actually, you can see the tools of the trade right over there. He's going to be doing some painting as we're here. And we'll get into why he's here and what he's painting and why he's painting it here in a little bit. But that's Chad Hill. And yeah, he's been part of Warbirds here for a long time. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Steve and just talk a little bit about his airplane, which is that one over there. He got into this Warbird business because he wanted to. He wanted to sit there and honor these guys who flew these airplanes, along with Sam up there. And he said, hey, can I afford a P-51 Mustang? No, he can't, okay? Can I still get into the Warbird business? Yes, I can. And he did, and that's his, and it's a beautiful, beautiful airplane. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, and just say, hey, how did you get there? Was it a matter of just, hey, walking in and saying, hey, what can I fly? And from what I understand, he didn't have a whole lot of tailwheel experience before he ended up with that thing. So, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you and say, okay, how'd you get to where you are now?
Thanks, Ed. First of all, I got to stop and point out that do I need to move this?
No, you're good.
Okay, he says okay, good. How's that?
That's good.
Okay, I'm used to having one that you're sort of chewing on in the airplane because you've got so much noise in an L5 that you can't have it out here. You won't pick up anything. But I'm pleased to be here. I feel pretty humble, so if I screw this up, forgive me, because I come here to sit there and watch the cool guys from World War II, and so being up here to me is out of place a little bit for me, but I'll do the best I can. But I do want to point out that the way Ed worded that, it's like we're in a political era. He's sort of creating his own image kind of thing. But what he basically could have just said is he went to the Air Force Academy, but his brother was smarter than him.
Hey, I can turn that mic off. I can turn that mic off.
So that would be the way I would see it. But in a political era, we all see things with two different views. But I like he said, I was a poor East Tennessee hillbilly guy, only child. My father was elderly and had kidney disease, so that's why my parents told me when I was 25 that they only tried once. I think it's because they had me, and it didn't go well. But anyway, I grew up and I went to the Naval Academy, which is I wasn't I wasn't a valedictorian, salutatorian, or any of that stuff. They actually thought I could play football. As you can see, I'm way too big and too fast to play Division I college football. So I went there anyway. They did recruit me. I didn't play a down. I never dressed for a game, but I got an education there, and then I came out and then wanted to fly fast things, like on fire and fast. The F-4, which he flew like 100 years ago, I had built models of, and I wanted to fly an F-14 or something. But I went into the P-3 community, made a career out of that, went to Maine, married way over my head. I've been married 43 years to the same woman, and she allowed me to come here because she thought it was neat to have a plane with her name on it. If she gets to listen to this, her name is Beverly. She's not the Miss Beverly we're going to talk about, but her name is Beverly, so it really segued into how that worked. I was not a tailwheel guy, but I wanted to get into the work, so I did go out approximately 11 years ago, let's say, and got a tailwheel endorsement. I had 4,000 hours of pilot and command time, probably 6,000 hours of pilot time, but I wasn't a tailwheel pilot for sure, and I probably had less than 100 hours of single-engine small plane time. Got the tailwheel endorsement, talked to a guy named Sam Tabor over there. Sam is a guy that works on planes. Tab Air up here is famous for all Warbirds, they call Sam, but I was told to call him and get in touch with him. He would know about L5s. I think there was one for sale. And back when, if you go back 9 or 10 years, I forget what this was listed for, I honestly do. I know I could go back. I think it was listed at something like 38,000 or 40,000. Sam knew the plane a little bit. We did a pre-buy. I came to East Troy where he's based and rented a car, and we headed down and looked at the plane that I think Courtesy had it. And I looked at it and said, well, that's cool. That would be so cool to own a plane painted like this. I'm not thinking about how the thing flies or anything, but Sam tested it out and said, yeah, it's not bad. And he said, let's offer him this much. And he actually, he said, offer him this because it's what's this and this and this and this. So, and this is about normal people owning Warbirds. They've done that here once before, but an L4 and an L5 has a tremendous history in World War II. Lots of young men went up in these things alone. It's one thing, because I've done both. It's one thing to go up in a formation of 38 T-51s and fight the Germans or the Japanese. These guys were alone almost all the time, and they were going out to find guys that would shoot at them. Not to shoot at them, but they did, and then they would call in artillery, or they would go and pick a downed pilot up like Sergeant Houston did in Miss Beverly behind enemy lines, probably landed in a place that even some of us would not want to land in, and got it back in the air with Japanese all over the place in New Guinea. And he got a Silver Star for that. That's the guy. That's what we're trying to honor here is the kind of planes and what these guys did, because we forget about so many of those people. I just saw somebody. I married the best, way over my head. Can't trade. She might trade me in. And I've got 2 children. I've got a son who's a naval aviator. Couldn't have a better son. So she knows how to raise kids. And I have a daughter who's given us 3 grandgirls, who's a nurse practitioner. So my wife knew how to raise kids and tolerate pilots, and she don't like aviation that much. So that's why I'm able to do stuff like this, is because I have a tolerant spouse. But anyway, back to the airplane. I went out, made an offer. They sold me the plane. I think it might have been around $30,000. Sam took it up to East Troy to sort of do a quality assurance. There was one little electrical thing that he said, we ought to change this because, it was a pretty minor thing. And then I was supposed to come up and get it and fly it home, and that's sort of the start of the history. And I've got about 500 hours in it, I think, pilot and command hours, well over 2,500 hours. I think I may have 3,000, 4,000, 2,500, 3,000 landings. And I take it anywhere that there's a show that would like to see a Warbird, and I can put up a display. What happened a few years ago to get into the point here of what we're doing with Miss Beverly is to make your plane a plane like Bud Anderson or somebody flew. You do realize that Bud Anderson's planes, when Bud would be here, and you could have two Old Crows, and Bud never flew either of those in World War II because they were gone. They were cut up. They were, and this plane is sort of the same way. This is not Miss Beverly 2. Miss Beverly 2 rusted into dirt in New Guinea because Staff Sergeant Houston is recorded to have had a Miss Beverly 3, and I think he was on number 4 when he was sent home because he was so brave that he had pretty much PTSD'd himself out of, they saw that he needed to have that done. So that's the kind of guys that flew these small planes. Got in touch with Chad, since my wife's name was Beverly. I said, I saw this picture of Staff Sergeant Houston in New Guinea with Carol Landis, the actress. Several pictures you'll find out. And somebody said, you need to get in touch with a nose art artist. So Chad Hill in the Chicago area has, do you pronounce it Django Studios? Got in touch with him several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. Can you do this? And of course, his answer is yes, I can. It's a matter of when. And I mean, he's an artist. He can do anything. This is not a vinyl thing that in World War II, in a liaison squadron, they might have to cut this out of a magazine and put a Vargas girl or something on there and shellac over it or whatever you do. If you can get a nose artist person to do it, but they didn't have that. They were operating in pockets. The 25th Liaison Squadron would split up into 4 groups of 8 airplanes and go out into the worst airfields in New Guinea or the Philippines and operate these planes. So did you have an artist that could even do a reasonably good job? Sam and I have agreed that we couldn't have put a stick figure on that thing that would make people not laugh. So we got a hold of Chad, and I think he's the best in the United States. He's done That's All Brother and bombers. He's done nose art. I don't know how many small planes like this is.
There's Chicken Man 1-6, back over here, the L-19.
Painted that this week.
Chicken Man 160, the L-19, a beautiful plane back here owned by Navy Captain Bob. But anyway.
Beach City Baby, I think, is coming this week. The C-53, I painted. B-25, Rosie's Reply, designed that one from scratch and painted. Executive Suite, the B-25 at the Liberty Foundation, I did that last year. The B-47, Chief Skyuma. So I've done a few.
Yeah, so he's really good at it. I'll just tell you, and I'll let him talk. He's going to do some painting here today, I think. When he took this cowling that I sent him from Georgia, I'm at an air park south of Atlanta. There's a couple people here. Thank you for coming, because they don't put up with me when we're down there, but they came today, I guess, so that I would only have one person or 2 people, Sam and Sherry here. But anyway, he took the cowling, I shipped it to him, and that Miss Beverly and the girl on it is exactly the size. I mean, he's that exacting when he takes it, because he had photographs of that nose art. So all of that is exact, and she signed it. There's a photograph of her signing it. Oh, it's not back there, but she actually signed it, and he's got her autograph on there, just copied as it was. So this is really replicated to the nth degree to make her Miss Beverly, too. And again, to honor Carol Landis, he knows more about her than I do, but Carol Landis was a beautiful actress, very young. When World War II started, she was like 21 years old, and when we entered World War II, and she was, Carol was one of the best people to go on USO tours because she interfaced with the troops. She was most gorgeous. One of the statements about her was she was the most gorgeous in the face and her figure actress that this guy had ever seen on the Jack Benny USO tour. She was the perfect girl, but she was very young. She would commit suicide, unfortunately, at age 29 after the war, because it's reported she didn't want to turn 30, but Chad has read more about, she was afraid of turning 30 and not being an actress anymore, but wonderful person. But the key that I'll leave you with there, that why I like the Carol Landis input, is Carol Landis would go home after a USO show after having diseases. She had a amoebic dysentery, amoebic dysentery, which you can't hardly get rid of or say back in those days. And she would sit at home and write hundreds of letters to young soldiers that had given her their address. And
Chad, tell us what you were going to paint. What are you going to do, and expound upon the history, if you will.
Well, I should probably back up and start from the beginning. So my name is Chad Hill from Django Studios. I've always loved World War II planes. My dad took me to air shows. My uncle, they were both in the Air Force. My uncle in Korea, my dad in Vietnam. And so I grew up really going to things like this and just loving the airplanes. And I noticed the artwork, and I always drew cars and planes as a kid. My mom taught me how to draw. And so as I studied the books for the airplanes, I was drawn to the artists. And, the first naked girl I ever saw was on the side of a B-29. So as I kept on with my career, the nose art just kind of something that I enjoyed. But it wasn't until 2007 when I got involved with the CAF and I was asked to do the nose art on the B-24, old 927. So I came up with that scheme. They had me down to paint it. And fast forward to today, I work with 25 different museums in the US and the UK, plus individual operators. You'll see lots of my T-shirts walking around the event. There's a Tora Tora one that I did. So I've really been fortunate that my passion has allowed me to build a career around it. And that's not something that a lot of people get to do because my wife thinks I'm obsessed with this stuff, and the stuff that I can tell her for questions that she didn't want to know drives her crazy. But I just love all of the history and the veterans and the stories and what the greatest generation went through. So when Steve sent me the photo of Miss Beverly 2 with Carol Landis, I love Carol Landis. My wife and I met swing dancing, so the whole 40s thing, I used to do reenacting, just that whole era I love. So I've studied a lot of that era, watched the movies, and Carol Landis was always an individual that I was drawn to because she's obviously gorgeous. She did 2 USO tours. The first one she did in Europe, and they ended up making a movie about it. She came back, she wrote a book about the experience, and then the book was so well received that they made a movie about it called Four Jills in a Jeep that starred her with Betty Grable, Martha Ray, and another actress, I forget her name. But she then, after she got back, they started planning the second USO tour, and they left with the Jack Benny Troupe in July of 1944, and they went all over the Southwest Pacific, Australia, New Guinea, the Philippines. She got sick with pneumonia in August of 44. She got better from that. She was in the hospital for almost a month. Went back, did a ton of more shows, went to places like the 90th Bomb Group, of course this squadron. And that's when she got amoebic dysentery, and it almost killed her. So she was really lucky that she survived that. But Jack Benny later said after the tour that when she did come back and wrote all of those letters after a 30,000-mile tour across the Southwest Pacific, that you wouldn't even know that she was this famous actress on all the movies and Sweater Girl and all this. She was just a lady who cared about the troops so much and wrote to all of the families that she had met while over there on the tour. And that's something that she was always remembered for, which is pretty awesome. So when I saw the photo of her standing next to the L5, I got all excited because I didn't really know about that. I had never seen that photo before. And that's when Steve suggested, well, maybe we should paint his plane as Miss Beverly and his wife as Beverly. So as Steve said, the liaison squadrons was such a small group of people. They didn't have artists compared to the fighter groups and the bomb groups. Some bomb groups in the Pacific, like the 380th Bomb Group, they had 5 or 6 guys that painted planes. The 90th Bomb Group had 2 or 3. A lot of fighter groups had 2 or 3. Each fighter squadron had their own individual guy that would do their planes, and you could see the differences between the squadrons. But not out there, not out in the middle of nowhere in the jungle where they're taking off. And they were lucky to have the Esquire magazine that they used to cut out the picture that ended up on here. And so they cut out the picture. Somebody crudely painted Miss Beverly to away they went. So when Steve brought this idea up, we knew we weren't going to glue the Esquire onto the plane. And with the Carol Landis connection, I suggested we turn her into Carol Landis, that we can honor her and tell the story of what she did and with the squadron. So come up and see her in close in person. That's Carol Landis' face on the Varga girl from the Esquire magazine's body. And then across her chest there where she signed it, I've replicated the signature. So Steve shipped this cowling down to me, or up to me, and I took the gatefold and measured it, and in Photoshop I was able to come up with dimensions of where everything went to get it as close as I possibly could to where it would have been during the war. And so I painted the lettering, and then today I'm going to add the red on top of that to complete it.
Outstanding. Thank you. All right, let's go into, and are you going to do that now? I mean,
Sure.
You can get into it whenever you want to, but
All right.
I'll pump Steve here a little bit about the airplane. You acquired it. Do we know the specific history of this airplane, where it was and what it did?
This airplane survived World War II, just like Sam's over here did, because it didn't go overseas. The plane serial number on the back there on the white tail is only about 130 numbers off production line of from the one that was Miss Beverly out in the Pacific. But this one was in Washington, and we spent some time in the 59th Liaison Squadron. It ended up being more of a hack plane, it sounds like, down in Texas, although they did training down there, and pretty much stayed in the United States. After it was produced in 43, so it did have long enough to have a history of flying with the Army. And oftentimes when I'm flying this plane, I imagine, because what else are you going to imagine? That, what young 19, 20, 22-year-old guy sat in this very seat looking at the same instrument panel, because if you do get a chance to look inside the plane, they'll be over there after this is over, both these planes. My instrument panel is pretty dang close to just straight stick World War II. There's a couple things different, but I haven't added things that Sam would want me to, like cylinder head temperature or something like that probably. But so that's what they were looking at, and they were very, very brave young men. And you didn't ask about how it flew. You haven't asked that question yet, right? We haven't gone there about what kind of how it flies.
Yeah, well, no, we're not there yet. But before we go there, I want to ask Sam, and we got a mic for Sam. Yeah. How about the history of your airplane? Where did it come from? And let us know what it did.
Well, World War II, same as Steve was pointing out, it was based in Brownwood, Texas, Wichita Falls, Texas, Waco, Texas, one place in one place in Oklahoma. It was there for pilot training for the liaison squadron stateside. Then when they were deployed overseas, they went ahead and were usually issued new aircraft in crates that they assembled in theater. So these were used as stateside training. This airplane was damaged in 1944. The right gear was taken off, and repaired, put back flying again. Came out of the military in Breckenridge, Texas. If everybody remembers Howard Pardue, that was his home area. And the civilian mechanic, that's the first signature that was signed into logbooks, brought it over, converted it from military to civilian. Spent much of its time in California in the civilian world, was with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Actually, San Bernardino Sheriff owned it, but it doesn't sound like it was part of the department, that they used it on the side. So, and then it spent a little time in the Hollywood area. This was actually owned by Tallman's Aviation, and was in the movie Catch 22, the famous raft scene where the character comes in and flies overhead, buzzing a gentleman on the raft, finally hits and kills him, and that's this airplane. This same clip was used in Airplane 1 and 2, I believe, so we can sit and watch this airplane simulate a crash into a hill in numerous movies, but of course they didn't really do it. In about 1971, Tallman was doing an annual inspection, found some bad wood. The wing, we'll cover that later, but the wings are all made out of wood, and they basically shelved it, literally shelved it, put it upstairs, second floor of a hangar, and it stayed there until my old boss bought the remainder of the Tallman Museum, and then included in it was this aircraft, and I got it from him. So we got it in 1990, rebuilt it over a 10-year period, and she's been flying ever since, so. Sure.
Thank you. All right, let's get into now that next question about flying this airplane a little bit. You didn't have a lot of tailwheel experience. You jumped in this thing and said, okay, so from an inexperienced tailwheel kind of guy, easy to fly, hard to fly, what were some of the nuances, if you will, of keeping this thing going the right direction?
Well, part of a quick caveat about back to buying it. Of course, I asked Sam, can I fly this thing? I've got this many hours of tailwheel time. And he said, yeah, I think it's a pretty good plane on the runway, yada, yada. It's got a lot of power. You can do some things. So it really, I wouldn't know because it was my first tailwheel plane I owned. And I kept it together and not having to send it to Sam to put new wings on it or anything. But it flies great. I think anybody here, if you're a pilot, the thing about owning an L4 or an L5 is they're different. They're very different in their power and their weight. This thing weighs about 1,550 pounds, empty with no fuel, no people. You can run that on up to about 2,100 pounds pretty easily, and it still flies like a dream. I've had 2 300-pound plus guys in the back seat giving rides. You wouldn't want to probably do that in a Cub, an L4. So you've got a lot of good things going for you. It's got a lot of power. The downside is you can't see out front. I quickly named it the Corsair Trainer because if you ever get a chance to sit in a Corsair, you won't see anything out here. And this thing's got a high nose that blocks a lot of vision. So I had to get used to just watching what's sort of coming by on the periphery because otherwise you're just looking at your top of your cowl. But it flies into the air quite well. I think it's a good flying plane, man. It's when you get it up in the air, you can turn around a house and stay right over the house, and just every once in a while glance down at your speed. It's an awesome plane to fly, in my opinion. If you get a chance to buy one or fly in one, I highly recommended it. It can spoil you for a high wing plane. It's that 185, 190 horsepower engine will really come through to you. It'll out-climb some planes. I've flown with some dissimilar planes in formation, and it'll out-climb and do some things that you don't think of with some other planes. But
how long did it take you to get here?
Coming from south of Georgia, south of Atlanta, Hartsfield Airport, we had a lot of headwind. I was flying with a bird dog, so we stayed a little slow. Bird dogs, generally speaking, and this makes bird dog guys really pissed off. Bird dogs, really, when I set cruise power, I walk ahead of them. And so now some bird dogs can climb better than me. They put lots of different props on it. This is the kind of prop, when you see this prop, this is exactly what they had in World War II, as dimension-wise, by sensing it. But it took 7.5 hours to get down to DeKalb Airport, and 3 stops. I don't fly longer than about 2 hours. The L5 does like to drink gas, compared to some of your more modern Cessnas. Or some.
What does that mean? How many gallons an hour at cruise?
Well, it's got a slight modification so it don't run hotter, and that takes you a little more. But I think it's about 13
Gallons an hour?
13 gallons an hour when I'm cruising, and sometimes 13 and a half if it's not happy. But so 13, and by the time I've burned 26, 27 gallons, 2 hours, it's time to pee, get a drink, and not go into that final 50 minutes of fuel I want to have, because I have gone to airports going back and forth to Oshkosh on that long journey, and you get there and say, oh, that's cool, and you get there and then pull up at the pump and the pump's closed. So now you gotta take off and go to some other place in the middle of nowhere. So I like to have enough fuel to say, okay, I can go 20 miles down the road to the next place. But it's a dream plane. It's got flaps. I'll make one comment. Sam also is very familiar. Sam told me how it would fly. He laughs. When Sam's telling you something and there's something wrong, he'll laugh. He'll say, well, you're going to love the plane, but keeping it flying, you might have, when some people are waiting a week for parts, you might wait a month or 2. But it's, I think it's a great plane. I'd highly recommend it as far as a flying plane.
How much gas does it carry?
It carries 36 gallons.
Okay.
And so.
And how about useful load? We watched them loading all kinds of stuff into these things. When they were flying them wartime, how much stuff could they put in the back?
They were so spoiled, in my opinion. Sam might want to comment on this, or Chad either, because they were so spoiled by the power and stuff, they actually hurt themselves sometimes, because it's sort of a really good plane. Like I said, I've taken off with full fuel tanks and a 300-pound guy in the back, and I'm like 175, I guess, and thought nothing of it. But they would put 2 guys in the back seat. If somebody was wounded or something and a guy needed life-saving, they'd cram 2 guys in the back seat. Let's say that's 400 pounds, 350, and another guy in the front. They also would tend to put lots of ammo and medical supplies in that plane for obvious reasons. If somebody says you're flying out there where there's an isolated battalion, which these guys would go out to, actually there's an instance with Sam or Chad might know more about, where they resupplied like a battalion or a regiment for like a 3-day period that was cut off with everything. So if you're flying that airplane, having been in the military, I'm going to put every machine gun bullet, every hand grenade I can get on that dang airplane to get to those guys, because it may be my only flight due to death, but I'm getting them some stuff, and then I'm going to go back and try to do it again. But so they hit some trees when they would have 2 guys on board that are wounded, and they would sometimes not get above trees. You can read about. I've read 8 books. Go out and read some books about liaison planes. They're fascinating, because you don't get I was in a formation over Paris, and we saw 12 Focke-Wulfs. I mean, you get guys telling you how this stuff went, and it's wonderful.
How about CG? Any big CG problems? You could load anything anywhere, basically?
Not that I have encountered.
Okay. Sam, anything CG-wise?
She's very generous with her control handling.
Good.
And being whereas the FAA may be listening, it's always flown within the proper CG limits. The military never read that manual, and they loaded crap in here that would just about bring many airplanes out of the sky, and they lumbered them away. They moved an entire field hospital, personnel, equipment, tent, all dropped in by air with these.
Okay.
So they were pushing the limit.
How about any kind of IFR flight with these things?
Maybe Sam.
Okay, I was just checking. Did you even have an attitude indicator?
No attitude.
Okay.
All I've
Ball
got is
and
a turn
airspeed.
needle and ball, and airspeed. No VSI. no fluff like that. It's basically your air. You know, what's your airspeed doing? And I don't want to fly into the clouds with a turn needle and ball as my main. I've been in the clouds a lot in my Navy work. I think the Delta Airlines they asked the question is, you know, you really have 1,700 hours of actual instrument time? And I said, more than that, I'm guessing, but, you know, and I also had 650 actual instrument approaches or something like that. So I wouldn't do that in this. I wouldn't do, just to save my life, I don't know what I'd do. I'd just try to keep it upright if I got in the clouds. So I stay away from clouds. I don't fly. But they didn't mean for them to, that they weren't built for that in World War II.
Okay, I'm going to stop now, and what we're going to do is a quick walk around. And Sam, do you want to come out and join us for the walk around? We're just going to look at the airplane and look at some of the stuff that's on it, some of the nuances again, and then we're going to open up to questions after that. So let's start at the front, and you want to use your airplane or his airplane? Doesn't matter.
Check in with him too, what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we see what Chad's doing over there.
I don't know
now.
whether you've noticed, but he's got the M in Miss Beverly, and that is the way it was painted. He left that so that he could do this to bring it to perfectness of what was painted on the real one. And when he's out of the way, what he's done there in just the last few minutes makes that thing pop even more, that Miss Beverly thing.
All right, well, let's leave him alone. Let's look at Sam's over here then and start at the front. Lycoming 435, 185, 190 horsepower, something like that. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It was 185 during the war. FAA allowed us to change magneto timing, so they'll call it 190 currently.
Okay.
Six cylinders. Sure.
Yeah, 6 cylinders, of course. But I read somewhere where they said these things would go like 7,000 hours between. I'm just telling you what I read.
There are many terms for that. Bull hockey is one of them. No, that's not
okay.
true. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was going to say I want an engine like that.
Most of the side engine cases, when they would overhaul them, would stamp on the side total time going forward. A lot of military was 500, 600 hours.
Okay.
But they were flown under conditions as you had seen. So we consider it a 1,200-hour engine with the original old valves, probably an 1,800-hour engine with the modern valves in it. So we've got about 1,200 hours on ours right now.
Okay. Let's work our way around then. Let's
Sure.
Go ahead, and then I'll let you keep going.
General description. Steel tube fuselage, so like many airplanes, the skeleton is the 4130 chromoly tubing. That's the structure of the airplane. What makes it different than modern Cessna, the wings are all made of wood, wooden spars, plywood covering. So please don't do what the owner is doing, but the bottom is plywood. If you do that with me. But the top is fabric, open fabric here, and the controls aluminum framed, and tail surfaces are the same way. The fixed surfaces are plywood covered in all wood, and frame covered control surfaces. So you can imagine when they were sitting out in the 50s and 60s, rain, wind, take the fabric out, lots of wood rot issues, concerns like that. Thank you. Sorry about that. So basically, it's a fragile plane for sitting outside. They don't sit outside anymore, so they'll last a long, long time. So.
How about these funny slots in the front of the wing here?
So they have fixed slots, making it a slotted wing. You'll see that on SBD Dauntless, TBM Avenger. A lot of the Navy planes had it, so it had a good airflow control over the ailerons at low speed. So it was designed to have excellent aileron control right above stall, so you could have lots of good hand control stick action.
Sam, if I can interject, for all of you guys that fly, I think that may be the most dangerous thing about the plane is this plane is still flying while it's stalling.
Oh, yeah.
You've got control of it while you're dropping. So you've got to remember that this controls he's talking about would make you think you're still flying, but if you looked over at your altimeter, it's unwinding. So that's a little bit scary, but it doesn't. I've never had mine drop off abruptly, do anything like that. It gets docile, but it's a little weird to be flying and stalling.
That's how they often came into these short strips.
Right.
They would take it right to the edge. When it stalls, it's a very easy, simple mush, very straightforward, no bad stalling tendencies. When I test flew mine first time, I went out to stall it, and it was kind of, it should be right around here. It happened, recovered beautifully. I went out to spin it a couple of flights later, and I gained about 1,500 feet, and I was never able to get it to enter into a spin, as what I was trying to do is get it to spin. And finally landed, talked with a couple of guys, carried a lot more power, and horsed it around and got about a spin and a half. And she's a real sweetheart when it comes to fly.
What speed? How about a basic approach speed?
Around basic approach speed around 70 miles an hour with standard weights, 60 mile an hour over the numbers. So, and for you not guys, look it up. So it's Army. And so the Army was always miles an hour. Navy was always knots.
Yeah.
Army plane.
and flaps or manual?
Manual flaps,
okay.
Correct. You had 2 degrees, 30 and 45. You didn't crawl out here to do it. There's a lever in the cockpit that allows you to do that. And other than that, standard conventional controls, stick and rudder and standard stuff.
It was a recommended takeoff plane, recommended takeoff with half flaps. And I do that, and I think it takes off better. I have accidentally, is the FAA here? Oh, I was practicing a no-flap takeoff, and it does come into the air quite differently if you're used to half-flap takeoffs. I want to add, too, as Sam goes around, I've had so many people since I've owned my plane try to help me pick the tail up and turn the plane around somewhere. And as I told a guy this morning trying to help, I mean, wonderful people, I said, you got to trust me. Me and you can't pick that tail up. There's a handle like that on each side, and if Sam and I went and got on each side, we couldn't pick that tail off the ground. It's heavy tail. That's a lot of plywood and material back there, not a cub.
Yep. This is basically an overgross cub sitting here when this thing is completely empty. So even though size-wise, function-wise, utility-wise, when they used it, 2 different ideas. The cub was light, kite weight, very similar, or very small in and out of short strips. This was more of a moose. The Cub and the L5 were the World War II utility aircraft, also into the first year of Korea, because that was kind of left over. Into the second year of Korea, the L-19 or 01 Bird Dog was coming into play. It was designed and did everything that they were short on with the Cub and with the L4 and this. So aluminum wings, bigger flaps, bigger engine, better visibility. Steve's right about the visibility. The Corsair has better visibility than this airplane does. And they learned everything from that and morphed it into the Bird Dog, which is an excellent flying aircraft. These are the grandfathers. So.
How about when they turned it into an ambulance? Where would they?
This is an observer model, 2 pilot positions, front and back, standard seats. They did field modifications where they removed the rear seat. They cut a V structure out of the back here, and then they took, it's actually in the manual, took a picture of a wounded gentleman and kind of bent him around the corner. They made a small platform in here. That was the field mod. They finally went ahead and revised the design from the factory. They took the upper longeron, ran it straight back, squared off the body, installed doors on the other side. You could take a full-size stretcher litter patient and plug them right in the airplane. There's several out here. I encourage you to go look over here just behind the Fighter Town area next to the reenactors. Come over there and take a look. There's several of the ambulance models out there. It's stunning to see it. So, yeah, Wes's is here.
Yeah. It's a Marine Corps version, which makes it a little neat. The Marines use these things. And there's a couple of nice ambulance versions you want to check out, I think, over there.
How about landing gear? Landing gear looks, I mean, it's not a Cub landing gear by any means. So how's that work?
Standard Stinson landing gear, you don't see any shock struts. If you come and look inside the airplane underneath the seat, you'll actually see the main shock struts. This landing gear hinges right here, right at the lower longeron. So this will go up and down like a teeter-totter. And the other end of the teeter-totter is under the pilot's seat. and it has a spring oil compression strut in there, and it can absorb some fairly terrible landings. I can attest to that, but it's designed for off-road purposes.
You three-point it most of the time, or?
I wheel land the hell out of this thing. I was given instructions by good friends in Australia who had operated one for 25 years. You wheel land it on pavement, three-pointed all day long on the grass.
Okay.
And that's some of the best information I've ever had.
Sam said before we came out here, it's a Navy pilot's plane because if you land this thing too soft, the gear tends to come down like this in the air. So if you just barely touch down, it'll walk down with you. So, go ahead and slam it in there like Sam said, like a Navy pilot trying to get aboard the boat, and you'll be fine.
Okay, what else we need to know? Tail wheel, standard inflatable?
Yes,
Yep.
many of them have been converted to the later Scott type tail wheel. The original Lake State tail wheel was actually designed by a gentleman named Maul, who went on to make the Maul tail wheel. And Steve's got an original style. We've got a conversion on there. Now it's steerable through about 20 degrees, not manually locking, anything like that. So it's brakes are some are converted to modern Cleveland, and they were originally a expanded tube drum brake. That's what we've got. It's not too far out.
Is that a solid tire, or is that?
No, that is a pneumatic curved tire.
Can't tell from
And
here.
that is the Lake States model, and in front of it. Sam will probably be doing a modification on my plane whenever he can work it in, because the Lake States thing was probably made, I think he told me this, to be landed on grass.
Yeah,
And,
my Australian friend said it was mediocre when it was designed and quickly wore down into crap. That's Australian terms, but you know what they're saying. Yeah.
How about the paint job? You got a white tail. Was that standard?
For us, that was easy. We wanted an authentic paint scheme. We wanted some visibility. 25th Liaison Squadron ended up having white tail on many of their aircraft. Areas that they were operating had very high kunai grass. And if an aircraft of just about any type went into it, it was very tall, would go in and plop over, the tail would stay supported by the grass, so you'd see the tail section sitting out. So they painted white just for visibility of that. There was P-47 Squadron did the same thing. And then the Guinea Short Lines was the nickname. Short Lines was a term for a commuter train back then. And it was formed in Australia, the squadron was, and they operated out of New Guinea first and later in the Philippines. And so the Guinea Short Lines with the kangaroo underneath it was kind of their motto.
All right, I see my 5-minute warning sign here, so I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to open it up to questions. And before you ask a question, make sure you got the mic in your hand, and then go ahead, and we'll get whichever expert to answer. So go ahead. We got one right.
Hey, thanks a lot. Can you talk, is this a bomb rack, and then also the antenna looks different?
Yes, it is a bomb rack. Most of you, or many of you, will recognize this stainless steel piece as the adapter between the bomb and the part that hangs on a bomb rack on a medium or heavy bomber. So it was an internal piece. We found a photograph that had one of these installed in the field. They were mounting cargo pods and different things on there, so they used it for external. So this is a replica of a field mod. We've never dropped any watermelons off of it, that I'll admit to. And then the antenna, it's a trailing reel antenna. As the name implies, there was actually you extended out the antenna to a different length and to dial in a frequency, and the reel is up inside of there. It's a long way from the old push-button handheld stuff.
Thank you for taking my question. John Schmidt, I'm the L5 pilot. Thank you for taking my question. I'm John Schmidt. I'm an L5 pilot with the Minnesota wing of the CAF. 2 questions. Number 1, why are those exhaust tips shaped the way they are? And number 2, where the gentleman is painting, there seems to be an extra pipe coming out of the exhaust. What is that for?
The shape of the end is because that's what the engineers did, and they never told anybody. We don't know. It's just that way. It was a Stinson thing. Somewhere they came up with maybe there was a little bit of propulsion. We've never found a hard answer on that. What he's got there is the early That's the early carburetor heat muff. So much of that muff extended out, and the very front oval was open. It was an air intake as well. There was a tech order that made that closed off, welded shut, and then they just continued to use it. This aircraft had the same thing. We just put a later stack on it, closed that hole up a little bit. So.
I was going to comment about this. We left out the part. There were guys who armed these things. Did you hear? Bazooka Charlie was big up here. T-shirt Sherry's sporting there. A Marine happened to know about Bazooka Charlie, and out in the Pacific, and the Marines were flying these things. So he mounted bazookas under here. So he put 3 under each. On the wing struts, and went out and started firing bazookas at the Japanese. So the guys did. Some guys did want to fight back. What's that?
Actually, Iwo Jima actually gave a talk here at Warbirds in Review probably 10 years ago with a replica of Lady Satan, the aircraft he flew. So.
Thanks for coming out. Is that prop hand propped, or do you have starters on them?
There is an electric starter on board that it came with. So the Stinson had starter and a generator, and of course a battery, whereas the L4 Cub would have been all hand prop. These are very nice airplanes to hand prop. They're a good height. They don't start super snappy quick, so you can get a good swing and not get caught up in the propeller.
Nice to have a starter, though.
Yeah, I do, yeah. But when it doesn't work.
All right, any other questions? All right, looks like we're doing pretty good.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Looks like Chad's getting near the end. Mike's not working.
Step back for a second so that we can get a good shot, and it really does make this pop, and you can see it's a absolutely beautiful nose art. Yeah, there we go. We got a good shot up there, and yeah, with a signal.
Yeah, you'll notice I had to. So I had to dig down in the box for a piece of tape because the metal is so hot I can't even hardly put my hand on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll survive. But you think about the conditions that those guys did originally during the war. 110 degrees out in the Pacific on the islands, sun bleaching down. A lot of the guys painted at night because it was so hot in the Pacific. But They painted nose art in the cold, in the hot, anytime they had chance in their off hours, whatever conditions, whatever paint they could scrounge, to personalize the planes for the guys risking their lives. The ground crews and the artists, they don't get a lot of recognition compared to the guys who did all the flying, but they busted their ass night and day, 24 hours a day to keep these planes in the air and keep them going for the mission so that their pilot would come back safely.
They actually used these airplanes in several other capacities also. And it was a test airplane for, I think it was called the Brandy Landing and Takeoff System, which was, hey, it was originally a liaison. The Navy needed a spotter out there. Okay, they're going to, shoot their guns and go bomb somebody down there they couldn't see. And they said, okay, well, you got to have a runway to take off and land. So they actually used these airplanes, and they had that 600-foot wire that would extend out on booms off of a ship, and they would take off and then come back, and there was an apparatus on the top of it where they'd actually hook into it. It would decelerate it, and so they would use it in that regard. Then they also had a quieter version too. I know they tried to quiet. They put some system on this thing because it's reasonably loud. I mean, that's just the way it is. And they said, hey, if we can be a little quieter, it could be a little bit safer. So they really use these airplanes for an awful lot. And what they called it the flying Jeep. And indeed, that's what it was. You think about, General Eisenhower sat there and said, hey, there are four things that won the war for us. He sat there and he said, hey, the Jeep, he said, the C-47, the bazooka, and the atomic bomb. And I got to say that, I think that he was using this as a flying Jeep because this thing really did an awful lot for us in World War II.
I do want to say that maneuver-wise, if anybody goes loose trail, if you're ever doing formation and stuff, and you put a guy back there and he's supposed to mimic your maneuvers or something, I typically do that with a couple guys down there, and I enjoy. You can go 60 degrees nose up, let it bleed down to about 55 miles an hour, kick hard right rudder, it falls right back down the next side, and you're coming down the roller coaster on the other side. You can come down out of it and roll into a 60-degree angle of bank turn, and it's like you're flying something not like this. I mean, it really is a cool flying airplane to be able to go out and, I know Mustangs would do that a lot more speed and do all those things, but it was fully aerobatic. The only thing in the World War II pilot's manual that I remember it says, do not do inverted loops. Don't do an outside loop. Yeah. Do not do an outside loop, which I wouldn't do that in a Mustang or anything else because it just looks ugly and it feels ugly. I haven't done it in a T-28 once. The other guy did.
I understand. All right, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say first, thanks, Steve. Appreciate you bringing the airplane here and your knowledge. And Sam, thank you. Sherry, thank you for. And if you take a look on the other side, you'll see her name on the other side of that airplane, by the way. And Chad. Hey, keep doing what you're doing. That's all I can say. You're honoring these guys too, and a great piece of history here. And I'm happy that we were able to start this whole program off with the L-Birds. I think they very very much unsung heroes, if you will. So good job on everybody's part. Thank you, and thanks folks for being here.